everybody, and welcome to HUBCP's Lounge. And as always, I am joined by an absolutely epic entrepreneur today by the name of Galahad Clark. And Galahad Clark is the CEO and founder of a very, very cool minimalist shoe company. And we'll explain what that means in a moment, called Vivo Barefoot. So without any further ado, it is lovely to welcome Galahad to the lounge. Galahad, how are you?
Great, happy to be here. Last day before lockdown, so it's we're giving up our last moments of freedom to be with one another. So let's make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any crazy things you've done over the past couple of days just to get them ticked off the list?
Oh, interesting. I've just come back from the mountains of Sweden, which was a big mistake to come back here. You know, as I call it now, freedom. Where that's the last sane place on earth apparently, and life goes on pretty normally in beautiful surroundings. I mean, the joke in Sweden is that they were pretty socially distanced before COVID to begin with. So but anyway, that was my last little sortie before we hunker down in.
I love it.
London.
I've just got to say, and I hope the Swedish tourist industry are listening to this, which I'm sure they will be. But I went to Stockholm 2-3 years ago, and I must say it was an absolutely awesome place to go. Absolutely loved it. So Sweden, great place, guys. Go and check it out. So Galahad, tell us about Vivo Barefoot. Now, for me, there's numerous reasons today why it's going to be really interesting to talk to you. A, because it's always great talking to the founder of a business and talking about the concept and how it grew and the challenges, and especially in the world we live at the moment, and how you've adapted to those. But I want to get onto the fact that you guys are a BCorp business as well, which will become apparent in a moment what I mean by that. But it'd be great just to get a feeling for the story and where it started and essentially what these shoes are that you've created, what we mean by minimalist shoe company.
Sure. Well, I think as you alluded to, that I come from a long line of cobblers, 7 generations of cobblers to be precise, from Somerset, and so in many ways I was brought up in and around the shoe business, and I did spend childhood sort of school holidays on production lines all around the world. Honestly, sort of trying out and doing a bit of work experience. I ended up going to university in America, I think in many ways to escape the shoe business, and I grew up in a little town that's surrounded by it, and my name sort of resonated with the shoe business in England, and it was great to go somewhere where it didn't mean anything. But then while I was in university in America, and like every sort of middle class white boy, I got really into hip hop and Wootang Clan in the late 90s, and they were really into wallabies. And so, it was my kind of shameless idea to go and, effectively use those connections to go and hang out with the Wootang Clan. And we did actually end up launching Wooshoes together, not with Clark's. Clark's sort of rejected the idea almost immediately. But anyway, it kind of sucked me back into the shoe business. And one thing led to another. I ended up back in England running a little, needless to say, the Wooshoe business plan didn't go to plan for many reasons, not least that, my main business partner ended up kind of with the biggest bounty on his head in America since Billy the Kid. But I ended up, anyway, back in England running a little eco fashion business. I'm really into oxymorons like eco fashion and ethical business and barefoot shoes. As you can imagine, it's important to hold those contradictions within ourselves. And it was actually while I was already doing another little shoe business that a childhood friend of mine came to me with the idea of barefoot shoes, and he just took a pair of Nike shoes and sliced the sole off it and stitched on a kind of material on the bottom of it, and sort of made it into a sort of like a little moccasin almost, and said this is the way shoes should be made. And in fairness, he came to it through Alexander technique and getting injured a lot, and realized that he was a lot healthier and happier than when he was barefoot rather than in sort of clunky trainers. I instinctively loved the idea, but honestly didn't know anything about it. And for a number of years, we sort of developed the shoes as a side project, and it was very much started life as a sub brand of the existing work we were doing. But it just started to gather momentum on a personal level and a consumer level. Like, we started wearing them every day. We started sort of not wanting to wear any other shoes. The very few pairs, and in the beginning it was very, very few pairs, the customers started to respond to us, and the response was almost biblical. And then it was a combination of getting educated about biomechanics, about the anatomy of the foot, and also, like, frankly, going on a more of a sustainability education, that we sort of came to realize that there was no other way to make shoes on any level, on a health level, and a health of people and health of planet.
Can I just ask a question? Because this is really interesting. Everything you've said there, especially the bit about a former business partner and a massive bounty on the head. That sounds like a story for a story in itself. But maybe you don't want to go there. I don't know. But in terms of going back to the shoes, right? You said you take the shoe, you slice off the bottom, then you're left with the bare, almost the bare outline of what the shoe should be. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, but I'm used to shoes that are full of air, that are cushioned, that are padded. So does that therefore mean that when you take that out, you've got to get used to the fact that all of a sudden, I'd imagine the shoe feels very, very, very different?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like as little shoe as possible. It feels like, effectively a glorified pair of socks. And I mean, it's not like a new human experience to walk around barefoot, but it's
good point.
Everybody can do it amazingly without that much training. Running is a whole nother story, and running's a really complicated one, and in some ways is what's held back the whole barefoot movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, when people put them on, and especially in America, people always sort of come to me and say, "What's the magic behind your shoes, man? How do you do it?" And the point is, there is no magic, right? There's literally nothing there. The whole point, we've just taken everything away. There's no interference between the shoe and the foot. The shoe allows the foot to do its natural thing. And it's such an uncommon experience. It's such unconventional wisdom that people are kind of like, whoa, this is a crazy experience, as it were. But, this is the way shoes have been made for thousands of generations. The very first shoes ever made by the Bushmen on the plains of the Kalahari to protect their feet when they were persistence hunting were just a simple piece of eland skin under the foot that, that was the most simple sandal ever, but it was obviously worked for the purpose they needed it. When humans left Africa to cross the Red Sea and the mountains and populate the rest of the world, we don't have hooves or pads, so we needed shoes were tools that we needed to keep our feet warm and protect ourselves from puncture wounds and thermal protection. And and even the sort of shoes made by the Sami people in the Arctic Circle, they're just reindeer moccasins, and there's just one layer of reindeer skin under the foot. They have hay insulation, so they wear bare feet with one layer of skin around their foot and just hay as insulation, and it keeps their feet perfectly warm in minus 40 degrees temperature. But they're basically perfect barefoot shoes. So we're not reinventing shoemaking by on many levels, or there's no sort of technology other than the materials we're using. I mean, this is how humans have always made shoes, person by person, foot by foot, allowing the foot to do its natural thing. The whole notion of heels and padding and air and gel and torsion and pronation control is a really is a 20th century phenomenon, really, that I like to think, just a sort of blip of, like a lot of things in the 20th century, we just kind of lost our way a little bit, and it's just a sort of minor sort of what's the word? Sort of just we just lost our way momentarily.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And so it strikes me then. I mean, you're pointing out that this is not anything that is just unlike anything that's ever been out there, but you are definitely rewiring the way people think about shoes and their behavior towards shoes. So I guess the question I have is, from launching the business then, did you find that straight away people got it? What was it like all of a sudden, making the product like you have and getting it out into the market and, getting people to really adopt to this new way of wearing a shoe?
Yeah, well, look, in many ways, it's still people don't get it. It's certainly not conventional wisdom. It's still a sort of fairly well guarded secret that is only a relatively small percentage of the world it gets to enjoy, unless you're a Kalahari bushman or a Sami reindeer herder or a kind of a Native American, or what's the PC term these days, a First Peoples nation living on a pueblo in New Mexico or something, et cetera, et cetera. All those people get it and they've got the secret, but it's people that have grown up in rich Western societies are the ones that are sort of not experiencing it. And the truth is, we're obviously up against some of the biggest, sexiest brands and technology companies the world's almost ever known, or let's say great marketing companies the world's ever known, selling, unbelievable technology and incredible engineered products with all kinds of technology that no one can, quite fathom. So, the truth is, when we launched Vivo Barefoot as a standalone brand in 2012, we were aware of some research coming out of Harvard that was, as far as we were concerned, was the kind of going to be the cat amongst the big shoe pigeons. And we were calling up Panorama and 60 Minutes and all the big news programs, say, right, this is it. This is kind of the end of the modern shoe industry as we know it. We called up the factories, so are you ready? This is just about to go bananas. And needless to say, the research, let's just say, got kind of slightly watered down in peer review. It didn't get picked up at all. And we almost immediately went bankrupt. So we spent at least the first 2.5 years as we launched Vivo Barefoot as a standalone brand in 2012, having dropped everything else we were doing, effectively just scrabbling around, with the trying to sell mountains of stock that we couldn't sell. It also coincided with, in America, at the same time, there was a big lawsuit, a civil action lawsuit against the Vibram Five Finger shoes. And so there was a kind of, where Barefoot was arguably just kind of taking off in America, it suddenly kind of crashed around this lawsuit that happened. And obviously we got affected by that. So it was definitely the most intense period of my business life, as it were. That I dropped everything else that was vaguely working and profitable, and would focused everything on Barefoot, and it kind of just we had a tough couple of years. But
I mean,
once we knew it, we couldn't unknow it, as it were.
I mean, that is what's so inspiring about talking to entrepreneurs. It's the fact that so many times you've been through such difficult, brutal aspects of the business. How did you get through that? What is it that, to talk about what you just spoke there? So almost bankrupt because of the just huge amounts of stock you have, litigation going on. What was it that just kept you going to obviously get through to where you are now, which is creating a thriving business that, is doing incredibly well? But can you remember what just kept you going?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's classic. I think every person that builds a business knows about, those moments when you don't know how you're going to pay the wage bill at the end of the month, and you're frankly constantly staring defeat in the face. But I think, I've got a wonderful cousin who's my partner in the business.
Yep.
Who's the head designer, and so I think having a partner is really important. I don't think many things get built by individuals. It's always a little team, as it were. So you can't underestimate the sort of the group of people together. And I think when there's no question everybody goes through relative periods of weakness, as it were, and doubt and whatever. But it was very much like the core group that stuck together through those, and especially my cousin and business partner Asher. And it was ultimately, we just believed in it. We just knew this was the truth. The science was so correct. The sustainability logic was, resonated so clearly. We knew that there was, and we still believe it. There's no other way to make shoes. There's no doubt in our minds, as it were. So, and it's once you know it, we couldn't unknow it, like I said. And so we just kept plugging away, and you find a way.
Yeah, well, that's pretty awesome. Especially when you talk about the family element as well. There, so many businesses are built on a successful partnership from that point of view, co-founders, founders, what have you. But so, can you just give us a feel, Galahad, for the size of the business now? So, 2012 you started. Obviously, we're now 2020. What have you grown the business to? It'd be great to get some perspective of some context around the size.
Yeah, so we will. Our financial year ends in end of June, so we just finished last year at 34 million.
Wow!
And we hope to get to about 40 million this year.
Yep.
We're still growing even in these crazy times, which is super exciting. And in many ways, we're the last 3 weeks we've had our best 3 weeks ever. And yeah, it's always like it's never one thing. It's always like lots and lots of little things just sort of slowly coming together. I think there's a little bit of momentum, a little bit of word of mouth starting to work, and I think ultimately, like I'd like to think we're probably doing slightly better if it wasn't for COVID. But having said that, we're a business that is ultimately about reconnecting people with nature. We're a business about health, and those are two pretty important themes in the world we live in today. So I like to think Vivo's part of the solution and not part of the problem in these crazy times.
Yeah, Galahad, I'd love to move to something called the BCorp certification. That is, well, I was looking on the website, and quite frankly, some of the businesses, some of the companies that are part of this are just mind-blowing. So I'm just referring back to my notes here, because essentially what it's about is companies that meet the way it describes it is the highest verified standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. So could you just give us an outline of the reason why you went on the journey of becoming a B Corp certified business, which I believe is in September this year when you got the certification, yeah. And essentially what it means for the business, why it's so important to the business and to you personally?
Yeah, I think that Vivo and the way my cousin and I started this business was akin to the Vivo, the B Corp mindset anyway. Our forefathers started a business, and I think in many ways they were one of the original social enterprises in the 19th century, where they really pioneered business at the intersection of social justice, and they innovated a lot with their business, but with their business they also did a lot of good in the world. And they were also trying to make very healthy products for society, give a good value to society. Yep. That low pay differential from the lowest paid worker to the highest paid worker. They, in many ways, were part of pioneering the environmental movement, et cetera, et cetera. So and we were, and the modern business, as run by outside managers, sort of almost had nothing to do with that old business. But we knew about that business and were totally inspired by that. And so that was always in our mind going into the type of business we believed in and wanted to run. And so B Corp was just is frankly the sort of world leading certification body that helps solidify a lot of that thinking anyway. And we found it extremely helpful just to help us think through the various aspects of the business, because it's one thing just being an impact business and making healthy products, let's say, and trying to make them in an environmentally friendly way. But it's kind of a whole other thing to run a business that from top to bottom really sort of is a positive impact in society. The way all the stakeholders, all the employees, all the people one interacts with, the way the business is set up has society's best interests at heart, as it were. And B Corp just helps think through all those various aspects that, especially for a small business like ours, we, frankly, benefited a lot from the support and structures and sort of policy frameworks that B Corp helps you put in place.
Has it been, would you say, is it a big part of your branding, your marketing, in terms of what you're talking about, especially with that environmental, social dynamic and aspects? Do you think it's something that's important in this day and age to be attractive to people in, coming to join your business, but also your customers?
Yeah, for me, it's just like a no-brainer. It's a sort of minimum sort of course you should be a B Corp. It's not even a question. All businesses should be B Corps. All businesses should be run like this. It's the way. It's not it doesn't feel like it should be a differentiator in many ways. And in some ways it's just a sort of minimum almost compliance level that one should participate in. I think then what you actually do as a business, the type of products you create, and really how healthy they are, and how really the philosophy of the service you're providing society, that should be the differentiator, not the compliance stuff around running a well-governed, fair business that tries to minimize its impact and any harm in the world.
Yeah. So let's go to fast growth. You've mentioned some figures there. So 2012 you started, you've been through the storm, you've been nearly taken out of business, and yet today, northwards of 34 million, which just blows my mind in terms of, that is some growth. How have you found being, the CEO of a business that is growing fast? How has the experience been? Have there been, some big things that you've learned from the process that, you'd want other people to, to be able to share with other people and learn from?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing is to do something that you love and believe in, and and values that align to your values personally. Obviously the great privilege of owning and running your own business, and like our independence, and Asher and I, my cousin and I, still own the business 80%.
Yeah.
And we're determined to kind of stay independent and not be sort of owned by private equity or anything like that. And there's a whole nother can of beans there, and how to finance the growth. And that's that independence is super important to us, and we're anxiously trying to run the business to be able to finance the growth. And so therefore you need to run it with quite a lot of business discipline to obviously make enough profit to be able to fund the growth. So what's really important is, alongside all the lovely visions and everything, is to get the sort of business 101s right. And the best thing we did was bring in a really tough, financially oriented sort of that has since become our chairman, who had a massive impact on helping us make the business viable and get the sort of businessy bits right, so that we could, frankly, pursue our vision on top of that, as it were. So, you can't underestimate the importance of just business 101. And, it's little things like, and as a business that's, let's say in crude terms, if you're making 10 million pound contribution, that's net margin. And then you just need to make sure that it is just as simple as making sure you spend, only £9 million on overheads, and just having that clarity all the time. But then 1%, as the numbers become bigger and bigger, the 1%, the 2% here and there start to become really, really meaningful, and are the difference between staying financially independent versus not. But look, ultimately, I think businesses that innovate and have a service to give society are the ones that get the chance to stay independent. So I think it's also easy to fall into formulas, as it were, and stop trying new things and pushing the envelope, as it were. And so, the difference between, let's say, brand building activities versus just trying to get awareness on something super simple is also really important. I think, what we've tried to do at Vivo is build a resilience in the business where there's a certain complexity.
Yeah.
And we've almost resisted total simplicity, which is kind of counterintuitive to the way a lot of businesses are done, where you just get one simple idea and put huge amounts of money behind it and just sort of go for it. I think ultimately then you lose the resilience then in that way. And so we run a more complicated, let's say, interesting business than would be conventional wisdom, because we believe in the resilience around that.
You mentioned the word independence a lot there. I wish I kept a tally, but it's obviously something that's very, very important to you. Is it because independence for you is all about that spirit of entrepreneurialism, freedom to be able to do what you want with the business, take it in the direction you want to? Is that why it's just so important to you, that it enables you to be the entrepreneur? Is the reason why you started the business?
I think, yeah. I mean, now is the interesting time, right? I mean, all the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into this business to get to this point is, and the truth is, we're not really a challenger brand. We're still a relatively niche brand, so to speak. But the chance to then actually get into the game, as it were, with, like I said earlier, some of the biggest, craziest marketing companies the world's ever known. So there's a tremendous pressure, I think, for businesses around our size to do the PE deal, do the do the big trade sale, and a lot of BCorp style businesses end up losing independence around our size. And I just think private equity just then goes on and destroys so many of these businesses that should make up like a really positive fabric of our society. And as soon as you take that money, you immediately have to start making short-term financial decisions, and you lose the ability to sort of make decisions that frankly are in the interest of the greater good, because you're just hitting numbers in the short term. And you see that same in politics, you see the same in big business all over the world, and it just doesn't, it doesn't do right by anyone, I think, in the end. And so, that's why I talk a lot about independence.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. As I said, you said it a lot. I can see it, and rightly so. I think it means a lot to you. So the message is, Vivo Barefoot is never up for sale. This is a business that you're going to keep on growing and growing and growing, and who knows where you're going to take it, right?
It's interesting. I mean, my family has a bad reputation for selling businesses. As I said, I'm a 7th generation cobbler, but that business is interesting in itself. The family stopped managing that business 30 years ago, and in those ensuing 30 years, run by outside managers that in the end were on relatively short-term financial packages. It says a lot about the strength of that brand and that company, that it took 30 years to effectively milk it dry before it, when a shock like COVID came along and it didn't have the resilience to survive it, and it was still effectively trading off 20th century ideas. And no one had really done made the investments in the 21st century to set it up for the future and modernize it and keep it real, as it were, in that way. So I think it's an interesting question as to how long businesses should go on and what the structure should be. I think, one of the things I'm interested in at the moment is, to talk about, there's obviously a hell of a lot of capital in the world. And I get, probably, I don't know, 5, 6 times a week, private equity companies sort of chasing me because, and that they've got, and the banks obviously, suddenly when the sun comes out, they obviously they drive up with a lorry full of umbrellas. And they can't understand why you're not getting on that capital conveyor belt. But I think the problem is that a lot of that capital is wrapped up in these sort of short-term paradigms, and including the banks. And one of the things that I've just learned about is that in England, banking it started off as mutual banking, as mutual funds, sort of community cooperative style banking that was there for society good, as it were. And actually in Germany, still a lot of that banking exists like that. And so in Germany, you tend to find a lot more mid-sized family businesses that stay there as part of the local community as start of society.
Really?
Whereas in the UK, that it's only just been re-legalized only like 3 or 4 years ago. And a sort of acquaintance of mine is trying to now get the first mutual banking going again in the UK. And I'd love to be part of how capital can sort of find its way back to, a more sort of community-oriented banking that is not on that sort of hamster wheel of short-term gains like private equity. And I don't know what the answer is yet, but I just, instinctively feel there must be a better way than either private equity or some giant multinational bank that wants to sell you lots of products, or so, because I think it's just, it's a tragedy that a lot of great brands and great little businesses become no more because they get to 30, 40 million and then do the PE deal. And you see it a lot, right? People like Innocent got sold to Coke, and now they're kind of, they were just bought by a big corporation to play in the orange juice wars. And that was a business that stood for something and meant something, and it got destroyed. And there's countless other examples. And it's a great shame. So we'd like to be part of a movement that stands up against that kind of behavior.
What I find so interesting talking to you, Galahad, is the fact that there's a real purpose for why you are doing what you're doing, and money is not the driver, is it? That is very clear. When you've just said to me that you've had 5 or 6 offers a week, I mean, that's a lot of what we're talking. I'm presuming for someone to just, come in, take the lion's share of equity, and you can disappear into some very nice sunset somewhere. So for me, the lesson that I'm getting really loud and clear there is actually successful businesses are really built on staying true to why you do it, why you started it, where your passion comes from, what is it you want to achieve and what you want to change. Would you say that's a good summary? Because that's something that I'm finding really inspiring talking to you and hearing what you just said.
I think so. And if you're just doing it for money, then that's fine. I mean, it's understandable as the world's set up, and in some way, it's the setup is the problem. And so you can't, if you put bananas up a tree over there, and you can't blame monkeys for running up the tree and getting the bananas, right? But
it's a good
you need to sort of, I don't know, find a way to spread the bananas out a little bit.
And that is, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of our next discussion. So, final question, Galahad, if I may. That is the future, and we've alluded to it a little bit, but in terms of the products, what are the sales globally? Are you in other countries? Do you have a desire to really push this out to all corners of the world? What does the future look like for Vivo?
I mean, look, we do sell all over the world. The 3 biggest markets, or the 2 biggest markets, are America and Germany, and the sort of whole Germanic region. Czech Republic is, funny enough, the #1 per capita place for barefoot in the world. They're just really into it for some reason. I don't know. I think they're really into sand. They had a big sandal thing, and naturally
Right.
went into barefoot. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, Australia, Japan, Canada, all import, you know, and obviously Scandinavia, it's, you know, places that are sort of getting back into natural health, less so in places like Russia, the Middle East, and Asia at the moment. But I think it's, you know, so we're very much a direct to consumer business, so we don't sort of go and set up big offline structures wherever we do business. But look, you know, we're really, you know, we're just beginning on many levels. You know, we're far from where we want to get, where we want to be on any level. We're nowhere near as sustainable, and we sort of talk about it's not good enough to be sustainable anymore. You need to be regenerative, net positive.
Yep.
And, you know, we see the future of shoemaking as either being sort of supernatural, regenerative supply chains, regenerative agriculture from, you know, and animals can be included in that, but, as, you know, in proportion. And then obviously the way they're processed and the factories they're put together in all need to be super net positive. And then the other thing of shoemaking that's really exciting is additive manufacturing and 3D printing, and where we'll go back to kind of an indigenous way of shoemaking, where you make shoe by shoe, person by person, foot by foot, made from locally sustainable materials, and ultimately you'll be able to 3D print from greenhouse gases, and everyone will sort of have perfect shoes to their feet that allows them to walk and move in you know, in the ultimate natural way. And, you know, but the truth is, you know, those two ways of shoemaking we barely do at all at the moment. But I'd like to think that in the future, you know, there'd almost be 50-50. And at the moment, we're kind of doing a slightly crappy version of something in the middle of those two, where we're still, you know, making shoes and, you know, degenerative supply chains, long factory production lines, filling up warehouses with shoes, and, you know, too much single-use packaging, too many shoes end up in landfill. It's, you know, we've got a long way to go to really sort of being a business that doesn't do any harm in the world, and that, you know, it would be a shame to sort of have to give up before we get there, as it were.
It really, really matters to you, doesn't it? I'm looking you in the eyes as you're talking here, and I can just see there's an inner fiery steel as you talk about this. It's amazing how much it matters to you. This is as important as the profit, isn't it? If probably more important than the profit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we've seen what it could be, and we want to get there. And you know, it's, you know, I don't know. Nietzsche talks about, you know, you got to, you know, one of the great joys in life is walking through the forest, and then you come out of the forest and get to the top of the mountain, and then you go down the mountain and you try to walk up another mountain. And, you know, that's, I mean, you know, we weren't put on this earth just to sit around at the bottom of the mountain, right?
Yeah. Now I told a little lie. That was the final question. I have got one more final question, and I'll put you on the spot here. I didn't give you any forewarning, so I'll say it very slowly just to give you a bit of time to think about it. But you've been in business 8 years. So right now, what advice would you give to yourself back in 2012, based on the journey that you've been on and the experiences you've had and the things you've experienced, good and bad? Is there anything that you would, you know, you'd really want to make sure that you are very wary of or aware of as you start your business?
I think the cheesy answer to that is, and it's a classic maxim in business, is don't underhire, as it were. Like, don't, you know, like, getting the right people on the bus it's so much of building a great business and having a great team around you. It's you know, and it's, you know, if you don't enjoy building teams and working in teams, then you're not going to build a great business. And so, you know, there's a reason that the meat market is such a big lucrative business out there, and it's, you know, I think drives anyone mad that's in small businesses having to deal with headhunters and things. But, you know, there's a reason that's such a crazy industry, because it is, you know, it's a really difficult part of business, is getting that right, and you can't underestimate how important that is, I think. And the quality, and it's more, you know, it's frankly a lot more fun. You know, there's no point doing your own business if you don't hire great people that you want to hang out with, that you learn from, that inspire you, that you want to be around. So, and look, I think the truth is I underhired a bit through the stages, and then I think the other thing is, you know, and it's also a slightly cheesy thing to say, is getting the balance. You know, so I probably lurched then a little bit to sort of hiring people that were almost like too skillful, as it were, but you know, or sort of too into the brand and into the mission. And you just got to get that balance right in general, I think, of surrounding you, you know, and you can go too far to the really skillful person, or too far to the person that's really into your business, as it were. And in general, as a culture of a business, you know, you can have a bunch of diehard barefooters, let's say, or a bunch of, you know, diehard business, and so it took me years to, and the truth is I'm nowhere near nailing that right, but the culture doesn't fall on your lap in a business, and getting a team around you that has the right balance of values and skill is so important. And you know, if I was to give myself advice, I'd say spend a hell of a lot more time and thought and energy on that from the beginning.
Okay.
Because
Galahad, it's been so cool listening to everything you've been talking about. It's everything that I expected. You are one cool dude, but I absolutely love the fact that there's so much depth to what you're doing here. And so thank you again. I know you must be busy, very busy, especially with all the growth and expansion you're going under. So we really appreciate the time you've given us today. So,
oh no, I appreciate it. Well, as I told you, though, my big pressing appointment right now is to go and pick up my daughter from school.
Well, on that note, we will let you get off. Galahad, thank you ever so much.